Chapter 3, Between the Lines. Between the Lines. Minsk blinked, the unfamiliar ceiling above a cause for alarm as he recalled his last moments, and he hurried to sit, fire screaming across his torso. A strong hand was pressing him back into the mattress, Minsk's panic subsiding as his gaze fell upon the young, bearded face of ARandomAudiobookAppeared.
"Steady there," he admonished gently, "you'll reopen the wound. How are you feeling?"
"Well enough," Minsk grunted, pain flaring all through his side as he sank back into the pillows, his eyes falling on the small table next to him and the gingery blot of fur sat patiently upon it.
"He was worried for you,"
ARandomAudiobookAppeared smiled, Minsk reaching out to let the hamster climb upon his hand.
"Ah, poor Boo, I know you tried to tell me of the danger. Where are we?"
he continued, gazing about the small plain cell he had awoken within, his bed, that table and ARandomAudiobookAppeared's chair, the only furniture that was and indeed, could be fit into such a cramped space.
"One of the guest rooms in the temple to Ilmater. Brianna saw you being carried there and came to fetch me. You were lucky the priests found you when they did, another few moments and you would have been beyond our aid."
Minsk shook his head.
"It was no chance, a trap was laid for me. I was approached yestereve by a merchant desiring of guards for his caravan. I followed his directions, but discovered instead a group of slavers who sought revenge from my hide. They had pressed the merchant to this evil, but they were themselves betrayed, by a mage of their company, and I was able to slaughter all but one, though not without taking a blade myself. It was the merchant's daughter, pressed by guilt of her father's acts, who came to my aid and summoned the priests. But this is but the beginning. Come, we must return to Valigar and tell him of this, that we may decide our next."
ARandomAudiobookAppeared drew back, looking somewhat embarrassed.
I cannot, Minsk, my knight will be expecting my attendance at the order, I have my duties now. And you yourself should not leave your bed until you have been checked over once more."
ARandomAudiobookAppeared continued, a single pace taking him to the door.
"Sister Ingrid."
Minsk relaxed back into the pillows, watching the hamster watch him from the middle of his chest. Boo agreed with ARandomAudiobookAppeared and both were right, he needed to be healed before anything else could be done. He lay still and compliant as Sister Ingrid examined his wound, a few more prayers helping the healing along, before she bound him up again and proclaimed him well enough to leave, though she warned against any further strenuous activities until he was fully healed. Outside, the sun was already cresting the eastern rooftops, the warmth on his back a comfort as he and ARandomAudiobookAppeared made their farewells.
"I thank you for your aid last night, young ARandomAudiobookAppeared."
The knight looked rather saddened by his formality.
"Ah, Minsk, you do not have to thank me, and the Ilmater had well matters in hand."
The morning bells pealed across the city, ARandomAudiobookAppeared glancing up at the sound.
"Sir Ryan will be waiting, I will have to go, Minsk. Are you sure you can make it back to?" "I am fine, young ARandomAudiobookAppeared, Boo will not see me collapsed in the street. Go, you are late. If you need me for anything, just send word and I shall ask Sir Ryan." Yes, now go."
And Minsk watched as ARandomAudiobookAppeared nodded once and marched off down the street as fast as decorum would allow him to go, Minsk setting forth at his own much slower pace back to Valigar's home. ARandomAudiobookAppeared was returned to his old life, one of rules that Minsk did not quite understand, but Valigar was not so constrained, and those slavers would soon be brought to pay for their crimes, that he swore. Valigar had not been so concerned by Minsk's absence the previous evening, after all the man was free to come and go as he pleased. But his non-attendance at breakfast had caused a momentary worry, that was until the kitchen door had opened and the man himself had limped through, Mab giving a cry as her eyes fell upon the blood-stained tunic he wore. Minsk's reassurances that both it and the wound were long dried did little to calm the girl, and she was still fussing over him now, pouring his tea and adjusting the cushion she had fetched to spare his back from the hard wooden chair, and Valigar suspected she would have cut his food up for him if Minsk had let her. It was only when he had suggested Minsk may have wished for a bath after his ordeal that she left them, bustling off to stoke the fire in the washroom, a stern silence falling over the two men.
So, you were on the wrong side of someone's temper last night.
Minsk gave a grim laugh.
Indeed, it is so. Men came in revenge for Ahid's death. They joined him in it, all but one. You look as though you could have been in their number,
offered Valigar with a nod to the large brown stain on his green tunic, the fabric torn and already fraying. Minsk nodded gravely.
Indeed, the Ilmateri have my thanks, Bu says I owe they and the young Anoman much. Anoman was there. The warrior, Brianna, saw me carried down the street and summoned him to me. He stayed the night at my side, though this morning sees him return to his order.
The Rashmi shook his head, frowning slightly.
Such a strange life, where men must go where they are told, not to where evil pulls them. He seems happy enough with it,
shrugged Valigar, making no comment as to the irony of the Rashmi's words.
But what of these men? Do you think there are more? I do not know, but Bu believes he knows someone who will. The one that first sent me to this trap is a merchant of the promenade. Bu says we should speak to him to learn our next step.
Agreed, said Valigar, finishing his tea in toast to the decision,
and though I doubt you will meet him, I believe I should tell you we have a guest staying here at the house for the time being. He is just an old friend of the family, he will not be here long.
Joaquin's promenade awoke with the sun and was already bustling with people by the time they had arrived, especially about the stalls of fresh produce, where servants from the noble houses haggled over the food that would be gracing their masters' tables that day. The small ceramics stall in the south of the arena was much quieter. The merchant and his daughter stood in the mouth of the tent that held most of their wares, the pair framed by the canopied counter before them as Katrin lectured at her father.
He will be here soon, father, so you better have the payment ready, I told you we should have. Hello Rygo.
The merchant whipped around at Minsk's measured greeting, the man visibly paling as he stared up at them, a tentative smile pulling back his fleshy jowls.
Hello friends, should you not be with the caravan? Do not mock us!
Roared Minsk, the dishes on the counter between them chiming threateningly.
You sent us to our end and Bu would know why. I don't.
Katrin forestalled his feeble protestations.
I told him, father.
Rygo whipped to her, eyes suddenly blazing.
You foolish girl! I told you to keep out of this. Have you any idea what they will do to us, when they find out?
He drew back a hand to strike her, the girl defiant, and the swing ended as an embrace, the man pulling his daughter to him as he cried,
Oh, Katrin, my Katrin, so brave like your mother. Go!
He snapped to the two men still watching the scene.
Leave before they see us speaking and think I warned you myself.
Minsk was not so readily dismissed.
No, Bu will have answers. Please, father,
Katrin begged,
tell them, they may be able to help.
Valigar nodded, trying to bring some calm to the meeting.
We understand there are many slavers in the city who want revenge upon us, but why did they bring you into it?
Rygo released his daughter, moving a half-pace from her as though he did not want her to share in his shame as he admitted,
I used to work as a contact for the slavers, letting the right people know when shipments would be arriving and where the auctions would be held. I am not proud of my part in the trade, but I was young with a wife and a baby just starting out in life and I needed the coin. Well, the guild caught up with me after a couple of years and I got out of it, I would not have thought any would have remembered those days, but Ahid's old gang apparently did. They said I owed them a favor, that if I refused they would expose me as the man I once was and take my daughter, as well.
He sighed heavily.
Though many are glad the slavers are being rooted from the city, others are displeased, not least of all Ahid's men. As I understand it, they lost contact with him a couple of months back and the latest rumors have it as you're doing. They wished to capture Minsk here, a twisted justice in a way to earn them some coin, as well. But that clearly failed, and now they will just be out for blood. And where are they based?
Pressed Valigar, Rygo shaking his head angrily.
I don't know. But I would find them before they find you. The way they see it, you took their livelihoods and they have little left to lose.
Rygo whirled, a firm arm about his daughter as he ushered into the tent behind them and pulled the flaps closed. Valigar frowned but made no move to follow them, Minsk at his side as they made their way back across the teeming arena, through the western archway to descend into the market square beyond. So, some group of slavers sought their deaths. It felt like something a responsible citizen would go to the watch with, though in reality he knew there was little they could do, and having city guards poking around the slums would likely earn Rygo a swift retribution. He glanced to the man at his side, Minsk's eyebrows brought low in a frown as he likely consulted his hamster on the same problem, when a shrill cry halted their passage.
Wait! Please, wait!
It was Katrin, her deep blue skirts held up and showing the churning froth of petticoats beneath as she clattered down the steps after them.
Please, she gasped. She finally reached his side. You must forgive my father, but fear binds him. Speak to Goro, he works as a contact for Ahid's gang. It was he who they sent to threaten my father.
He face twisted with an unflattering sneer.
He may talk boldly, but he is a coward. And where can we find him?
Asked Valigar.
I'm not sure, but he stays mostly within northwest of the slums, perhaps try the taverns there. He is carrot-haired and gangly, and you will know him by his cloak, bright scarlet, it is. He claims he took it from the body of a flaming fist mercenary who challenged him, though many doubt his claims. I'm sorry you have been brought into all this.
Minsk sternly shook his head.
Do not worry, young Katrin, all who have wronged you will find justice in my blade.
Her face broke into a tentative smile.
Thank you, sirs.
And she was off, flying back up the steps, her footsteps echoing as she disappeared through the archway. Jahara let her eyes scan over the page unseeing, her mind focused upon other diversions as the breeze played with her short hair, stirring up the scent of leaf litter, damp bark, and the faintest trace of newly opening blossoms, the canopy above swaying to dapple the forest floor with an ever-changing pattern of light. Life in Suldanisselar was unchanged in essence, slow and pleasant, the elves content to live at nature's pace rather than forging ahead, always on the press for something more as the human settlements seemed to run, and Jahara had not felt such peace in years. It was early Tarsuk, a promised day of uninterrupted sunshine after the few 10 days of rains enticing them out of the city, their own much-reduced company being joined by the few soldiers, courtiers, and priests they had befriended over the last month, all heading out into the forests on an impromptu picnic. Jahara smiled to herself, feeling warm and contented, her body light without the leather armor she was all too used to wearing, the thin cotton tunic allowing her to feel more of her surroundings. There had been the usual gathering of talk and food at first, their party settled on blankets and cushions under the trees, though the clearing was quiet now. An hour or so ago, someone had produced rackets and a shuttlecock for a game of battledore, Imoen cajoling Solafane to pair with her after it became apparent Fritha would not be joining them. Jahara let her eyes flick to the girl, just a blanket's width away and fast asleep under a large crimson parasol. She became tired much more easily than Jahara had before realized, though without knowing the cause, she could provide little by way of a cure. Perhaps it was best the majority of their group had departed to find some space for their tournament, leaving the more sedate of them there, a pair of maids engaged in quiet chatter opposite her, while at the edge of the clearing, a courting couple lounged in a lazy embrace. Jahara went back to her book. The others had been gone a fortnight now. Fritha seemed better for their absence, though Jahara was not sure from where such a change stemmed. It had been clear to all that Imoen missed Airy and Herr Dallas's company in those first few days, a breach that, though she had tried, with their differences in age and personality, Jahara had found it impossible to fill. But perhaps Fritha recognized their frustrations and the sacrifice that was being made for her, for she had been making regular visits to the palace that last Tenday, the girl joining Imoen and her elven friends, gathered in the gardens for talk and Imoen's much-loathed embroidery, Fritha managing to smooth the disparity between the young human and the seemingly younger maids. While other times would find them sharing instead more private moments in the small sitting room where they took their meals, the girls playing games and talking, Solafane usually at their side, the man saying little but observing all as he no doubt worked on his Condé then. Jahara glanced to her again, the girl sighing fitfully in her sleep. Fritha may not have moved back to the palace as she had been asked, and towards the evenings, Jahara could see the strain of their company beginning to show, the girl's gaze often drawn to the window, perhaps longing for her small house on other side of city, but, for all that, she was most definitely trying.
Fritha! Fritha! Look what Solafane's got!
And suddenly Imoen was bounding into the clearing, Solafane but a pace behind her, the rest of the elves following in twos and threes, reactions to this exuberance ranging from amused to mildly scandalized. Even for the noise, Imoen would have been difficult to miss, wearing a tunic that matched her hair and a huge smile. The recent sunshine had brought out her freckles, the light stippling on each cheek lending all the more to her impish air.
Please, Imoen,
cautioned Solafane quietly,
she may still be.
But it was already too late for his warning, Fritha stirring at the cry of her name, the girl brushing the hair from her eyes and making a half-hearted attempt to tidy the nest of curls at her crown as she sat to greet their return, Imoen and a few of the elves assembling before her.
Hello, how was your game? Oh, Sofidha and Ivarin won,
dismissed Imoen,
but look what Solafane's got.
Fritha gazed at the large brown shell he brought from his bag, the size of an ostrich egg, the surface lined and wrinkled like a gnarled, tanned fist.
Oh, a nut. It's not just a nut, Fritha,
laughed Imoen,
it's from the great tree. From the tree of life,
confirmed Jahara, she did not even know it bore such fruit. The russet-haired elf she knew as Lydril nodded.
The branches of the great tree stretch out for leagues all round here, though they rarely put forth fruit this far out. As we were all walking back, Ivella here.
He sent a smile to the blonde and rather stern-looking woman next to him,
spotted it hanging high in the boughs above us. They are rare,
Ivella offered, taking up the tail,
even back in the heart of the tree. Elseim has the rights to all the ones that grow within the boundaries of the city, though that isn't many. It is said they are imbued with the essence of the tree and have magical properties.
Breathed the much younger Floria, golden ringlets trembling.
They say the meat of these nuts bestow the flawless beauty of nature, which is why our queen is so famed through all the lands. Such is unproven, sister,
sighed Ost, with a roll of his fine green eyes.
They are merely a delicacy that the court enjoys when it may. You cannot say that for sure, brother, you have never tasted them. Yeah, well, either way,
interrupted Imoen, before this sibling squabble could get underway.
One this far from the city is fair game for anyone lucky enough to stumble upon it, and everyone was gathered beneath talking about who would be able enough to climb up there and get it down, when Solafane just tipped back his hat and PHTT.
With a flick of her wrist, Imoen mimed the knife he had no doubt thrown.
Just nicked it out of the tree with his dagger. Just like that. It was amazing. It was a truly remarkable shot,
agreed Lydril. Ivella was nodding evenly.
Yes, I never would have thought it possible. And it was so high,
enthused Floria. Ost frowned.
I could have made it, had I my bow.
Solafane shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable with this praise even as he stooped in a bow, a hand, and the large wrinkled shell it held outstretched before him.
Here, Fritha, your prize.
A glance between the assembled elves, it was clearly an offer of some significance to them, though Fritha was seemingly ignoring it, nodding her gratitude as though she had expected no less from the man.
My thanks, Solafane.
The rest of the elves were all seated by now, Lydril and the others moving to sit with them, the group temporarily splitting as each race settled with their own tongue. Fritha shifted her pack, making room for Solafane in the shade next to her as Imoen flung herself down on the blanket before Jaehaera, face titled back as she enjoyed the sunlight. Fritha was gazing at the nut she now had balanced upon her upturned hand, the narrow lip where the two halves joined tightly sealed, and Jaehaera was just wondering whether they would be able to open it without damaging the shell when a tap of her fingers and Fritha was gently parting the two halves to reveal the pale treasure of meat within.
How do you do that?
asked Imoen. A quirk of Fritha's lips.
Magic. Here, would you like some?
They shared that half between them, Fritha passing the other to their elven friends to try. Jaehaera licked her lips. The meat was sweet and rather oily, though other than that she found no more remarkable qualities. Perhaps it was as Ost had said. Imoen's face was screwed up, the girl trying to pick stray bits of nut from her teeth with her tongue.
Well, it was all right. Not quite as nice as those sherry-soaked chestnuts Beth used to make. It is quite oily,
said Fritha, the girl watching her fingers shimmer as she moved them.
That's probably supposed to be good for you, too. Rub on your face. Let's see if Floria was right.
Fritha shook her head, slowly massaging the oil into her hands.
No, I don't want any artists on my conscience.
Imoen laughed, licking her own fingers clean and wiping them on her trousers.
I wonder what food they will lay on at this wedding. Oh, a banquet, I'm already excited and it's still 10 days away.
Jaehaera smiled. The invitations had arrived with a courier that morning. Nalia's wedding was to be held at Diarna's keep on the 25th day of that month and she, Fritha and Imoen were all invited to share in her joy.
And 10 days is plenty of time to have dresses made,
Imoen continued practically.
I think mine will be pink. What about you, Fritha?
The girl shrugged.
I haven't really thought about it. You always liked blue, what about a light blue one, like the one Elsyme wore to that party? Yes, perhaps.
Imoen puffed a sigh, seemingly deflated by her lack of enthusiasm, the girl pushing a hand into her pocket to pull out a slightly crumpled square of parchment.
And what is that you have there?
asked Jaehaera suspiciously, though she felt she could have already made a guess. Imoen seemed to be very focused on opening it out, and to the point where she could not even meet her eye.
Just a letter. It came with the same courier as the invitations, I suppose? I knew I saw you stuffing something into your pocket this morning, you said it was nothing. Did I?
Muttered Imoen innocently. Jaehaera snorted. She had a pretty good idea who it was from, too, if the girl was inclined to be that secretive. The druid understood it though, that desire to enjoy such things alone and let the pleasant stir of emotions fade a little before sharing it with the world. and apparently, Frithha recognized that look, as well.
Another love letter?
She confirmed with a smile.
You are building quite the collection.
The pink was rising in Imoen's cheeks.
It's not a love letter. Then a poem, perhaps?
Offered Solifane mildly. Imoen snorted.
I don't think so. Some soppy love poem, I'd sick up my guts.
The drow raised an eyebrow.
Very descriptive. I can see you have a flair for the poetic even if you disdain the thing.
Jaehaera smiled as the two girls laughed. His Kondaidan was improving, and with it was emerging a previously unheard wit. She wondered if he had ever before been given chance to exercise it.
Go on then,
the druid sighed, gently batting away a rather persistent bee who had taken her thin, russet tunic as some strange bloom.
What news does young Korthala send from the city?
Imoen glanced up from the parchment.
How did you know? Oh, bugger off.
She laughed at the round of knowing smiles.
Valigar says that everything is well. Minsk is staying at his house while he's still looking for passage north, and Inomen seemed settled at the order when he met him last. He also mentions that everyone's favorite Lathendite, the dishy Squire Simon. Your words, I assume, not his,
quipped Jaehaera.
Maybe Squire no longer, for he is to be put forward for his knighthood this coming Greengrass.
Frithha was smiling.
Really? Oh, that is good news, I am so pleased for him. I know,
grinned Imoen, making to fan herself with the parchment.
Sir Simon, it just sounds gallant. Anyway, Valigar also says he dropped in at your theatre. Apparently, Higold is renting out the playhouse of an evening to some Waterhavian troupe, while they begin rehearsals for the minstrel and the maiden.
Frithha frowned.
But that is a musical play. Yep, and apparently when he was there, Higold told Valigar that casting has yet to be finalized, and he would be very glad to see you in it.
Frithha smiled even as she shook her head.
I think my days on the stage are over. Days?
Repeated Jaehaera.
It was one evening, Frithha. And that was all I needed to convince myself it was not the life for me. You never said you were in a play,
cried Imoen eagerly.
What part did you have? I was the apprentice in the Sorcerer's Bane for one night after our leading man fell ill. I wasn't very good. You were fine, Frithha,
Jaehaera corrected sternly.
Quite apart from the fact you learned the entire part in a day. Yes, all rather nerve-wracking, wasn't it?
The girl sighed absently, as though recalling a lifelong past now.
Well,
continued Imoen, eyes back on the parchment,
I'd offer this Higold myself for the part of the maiden, but I think I might find the acting of it a bit of a stretch.
Jaehaera rolled her eyes as Frithha and Solifane enjoyed a laugh, Imoen looking more than pleased, amusement or admonishment, the girl revelled in both.
Oh, and Mek says could you please come back, Frithha, and give him someone to talk to, because since the play was announced everyone has been spending every spare moment in the dressing room practicing their scales, in anticipation of the music tutor Higold's hired.
Imoen glanced up from the letter with a grin.
So, who's this Mek then? He's the messenger for the playhouse,
answered Frithha. Her friend's green eyes were instantly alight.
Is he handsome? He's about 10 years old. Oh well,
Imoen sighed,
I'm better off with Sir Simon anyway. Squire Simon,
reminded Frithha,
he's not knighted yet. You carry on like that and you'll jinx the boy. Oh, what a shame that would be, I would have to do my best to comfort him. Imoen!
cried Jaehaera, over the snorts of laughter.
By Sylvanus, was there something in your porridge this morning?
The girl made no answer unless her giggling was to be counted. How telling that she seemed happy to flirt about every boy but the one who had taken the time to write to her.
"I'm glad everyone is well,"
sighed Fritha, the girl stretching her legs out before her, her feet suddenly glowing white as they left the shade of the parasol.
"I think I may go for a walk and wake myself up. Do you want to come, Imoen?"
Her friend shook her head, now reclined upon the sun-dappled blanket, the letter held above her and, shading her face, she read it for what was likely the 20th time.
"Nah, I'm happy here. You go ahead, don't do anything I wouldn't do."
Fritha just smiled. Solafane already stood at her side, a hand reached down to help her to her feet, and the pair were moving off through the trees. Jahara watched them go before returning to her book. It was as the sages said, spring was the hope of summer. Their table was in the shadow of the bar, easily overlooked, even by the maids, and with a good view of the doors, he and Minsk keeping a close eye on them as they drank in steady silence. They were in the Yardstick, one of many grimy tavern brothels that dotted the northwest of the slums, each place holding the same air of drunken destitution, where the majority of the patrons went to escape their reality in the bottom of an ale cup, or in a chalice of another sort. Valigar considered with some revulsion as he watched another man being led upstairs by a heavily painted whore. The ranger shifted his weight on the ill-padded bench, raising his cup for another sour mouthful and displeased to find his sleeve peeling slowly from the table, clinging to what looked to be the sticky residue of a few days' spilt ale. It had been 3 days now, each night finding them in a different round of taverns. But still there had been no sign. This Goro was either lying low, or they had just been very unlucky. Valigar glanced to the windows at the far end of the room, the panes black. He had agreed with Minsk an hour ago, one more drink and they were finishing for the night. At the end of the bar next to them, a stout but handsome whore was nursing a cup, her eyes straying to the doors as often as his, black curls bobbing as she suddenly raised a hand to call across the din, "Here, Amy, you off home?" The younger woman glanced up from where she had been fastening her threadbare cloak, a smile making her look far prettier than a first glance would have judged as she weaved her way over to her friend.
It's too quiet for me in here tonight." And young Matthew's ill again. "Oh no, the poor bairn, same as last time."
"Yeah," Amy sighed, running a hand through her dirty blonde hair.
"It's all on his chest and his breathing rattles day and night, bless him. I'm giving him that linctus old Farad give us, but it ain't doing much."
The stout woman snorted.
"Farad? I ain't surprised, that old charlatan. Here, Amy, I've had a good run of tips lately, how about we go over to the apothecary tomorrow, get him looked over and buy some proper medicine?" "Oh, heavens bless you, Olga,"
Amy cried, sounding suddenly close to tears.
"That would be a weight off us all. So, you here much longer tonight?" "Nay, just waiting for that dog, Goro, then I'm off, as well."
Across the table, Minsk's eyes sparked, he had heard it, too. Back at the bar, Amy gave a snort of disgust.
"That swine, never pays a copper more than he must. At least it's easy work."
Agreed Olga,
"though I hear he don't last long in either respect."
The two women laughed, their amusement brief as they leaned together to kiss their farewell.
"You be safe, then, pet."
Nodded Olga.
"I'll stop by yours tomorrow and we can go down first thing."
The two women parted, an air of expectation now over the table as the two men waited, the whore Olga oblivious to them though her impatience matched their own as she sighed and tugged, and swillied the contents of a cup she no longer desired to drink. It was a good quarter hour later when the door finally opened and in he stepped, the man so obvious that all Valigar's previous worries that they could have been within the same bar before and missed him seemed suddenly farcical. In those drab surroundings of grey and brown, he shone like a beacon, red cloak clashing with the vibrant orange hair. Even the self-satisfied grin set him apart from the crowd in there, his Weasley face taking on a lecherous cast as he arrived at the bar.
"All right, Olga,"
he leered, groping her behind in greeting.
"You ready to go up?"
Her tight smile did not flicker.
"Aye, as you will it."
Valigar's attention snapped back to the man opposite as the couple moved off, Minsk's eyes bright in the gloom.
"We'll leave it a few moments and then follow them up," agreed.
The Rashmi nodded, words beyond him in this swell of anticipation, the moments ticking slowly by when they rose as one and made their way up the creaking staircase. Amy had been right. It was a very slow night. Most of the whores stood at their open doorways chatting up and down that long L-shaped corridor, Valigar's eyes drawn instantly to the closed door at the end of the short hallway to his right. He collared a passing girl, his stomach twisting as she looked up, and he realized she was barely into her teens.
"We're looking for Olga, is she in here?"
She nodded mutely, Valigar taking a step forward as the stocky madam rushed to halt them.
Hello gentlemen, and what can now you cannot go in there, Olga is already."
She could do nothing, Minsk pushing past her, and the door was suddenly opened, not on some cramped coupling, but a square room of decent size, Olga filling the last cup for the 6 men seated about the table.
"Now, is there anything else I can be getting for you, gent?"
She glanced up, everyone frozen when Minsk roared,
"Lejun!"
And everything was happening at once, the Rashmi charging into the room to kick the table over in a shower of ale, the men all on their feet, those rushing for weapons tangled up with those rushing for the door, Minsk wading into the chaos, blade swinging. 3 men were already dead, Valigar blocking a blow from a short, wiry man. The dagger he held swung wide in his panic, and it took little effort to bring his katana round to slash across his chest, Minsk finishing another with a stab through the torso, the blond man that was left dropping his dagger and holding up his hands as he backed into the corner.
"Mercy, please, I surrender."
Minsk was advancing on him with heavy strides, the man giving a terrified squeak as he seized his collar.
"We owe you much, Lejun."
Valigar left him to it, his attention turned to the only other in that room still breathing. Olga stood in the far corner, her eyes fixed on the carnage about her. She was not shaking, she looked too surprised to be frightened, the woman just frozen, her wide glaze flicking to him as he approached her. Valigar reached for his pocket.
"Here, take the boy to a priest."
The woman nodded, the gold chiming merrily with her footsteps as she shoved the purse into her blouse and scurried to the door. Valigar turned slowly back to Lejun, the man stood trembling in Minsk's grip. A nod from Valigar and the Rashmi was shoving him roughly into the nearest chair, the 2 men towering over him.
"Speak,"
barked Minsk.
"You sought our deaths, why?"
Lejun was wide-eyed.
We never sought your deaths." "I have a scar that says otherwise." "No, I mean, we just wanted to capture you. It was that mage's idea, but then his wand didn't work and he teleported out, that bastard." "And who was this mage?"
pressed Valigar. Lejun shook his head wildly.
"I don't know. We never learned his name, just some foreign bastard from out east. He approached us a 10 days ago, said he had a business proposition for us. With the city all stirred up over slaving, there are many in Athkatla who are seeking to get rid of their merchandise." "These are people you speak of?"
roared Minsk.
"Yeah, all right,
cried Lejun hastily,
"people, they're people. These slaves, they aren't just your usual laborers or pit fodder, others' words, not mine."
He added quickly at Minsk's furious look.
You see, the slaves still hidden here now are skilled craftsmen, chef, masons, weavers, who've served houses here for years. In a place like where slavery is illegal, the risk of keeping them has to be outweighed by the value they hold. I tell you, that Renald's execution put the fear of Bane into the people round here. There hasn't been a noble executed in the city of Athkatla for any civil crime in over a century. Well, now the magistrates have made a stand. Everyone wants to be rid of these slaves lest they are caught and are next to face the noose.
Lejun shook his head tiredly.
Most are too frightened to just set them free, lest they go straight to the authorities, and killing them has its own problems. This mage had a solution. He would find buyers for them in his native Mulhorand and export them there. We knew the guards would be watching the ways south to Kalim Sham, but Mulhorand is far and foreign with it. You would have to have contacts there, and this mage was ours. We would provide the slaves and he would provide the buyers, each taking a cut in the transition, and everyone was happy. So what happened?
Asked Valigar quickly, before Minsk could explode again.
I told you,
Lejun pressed.
That mage said he wanted to make a quick bit of coin first to help with the initial outlay, and after hearing your friend here had killed old Ehud, we decide to capture you for sale. Then he betrays us and we're dead. Please.
He sighed tiredly.
I know we planned much, but we never actually managed anything. You threatened Ryko and his daughter,
bellowed Minsk. Lejun glanced wildly between them, panicked once more.
Who? Look, mate, I don't know anything about that. The mage arranged it all with our new leader, Guillaume. The mage said he could get you to the crossed keys and he did.
Valigar frowned.
Do any more of your gang still survive? No,
Lejun muttered, eyes downcast as he took in the bodies of his friends about them.
They were the last of them. And what of these people that still hold slaves on their estates?
Pressed Valigar.
Did Guillaume keep a list? No, he could barely write as it was, but I can likely remember a few of the names.
He glanced up, suddenly hopeful.
It should look good for the magistrates, don't you think?
Valigar snorted.
I would not count solely upon that if you wish to avoid the young Renald's fate.
And as though on cue, the distant rattle of armored bodies echoed up the stairs.
Make way for the watch.
Lejun's throat bobbed nervously, his face ashen. Valigar and Minsk shared a smile. Valigar pulled his door closed behind him. The afternoon spent poring over the accounts leaving him tired, a feat in itself considering he had not risen until noon. Last night they had had to wait and give their statements to the watch, handing a pale Lejun into their custody, and it was well past midnight by the time he and Minsk had finally made it back to the estate. In fact, the only thing that still irked was the absence of this mage. But, whatever the reason for his betrayal, the man seemed likely long departed, and the watch planned to take a full statement from Lejun at the jail. Perhaps they could consult the cowled wizards and find him yet. Valigar moved down the hall, his booted feet making no noise on the thick carpet. He felt pleased, with both their work last night and this afternoon, the two seemingly disparate halves of his life slowly merging into a manageable whole. He learned more of his estate each day, and he and Minsk had managed to rid the city of another group who would profit by people's misery, the news of which they planned to take to Hendak that evening over a few drinks. He had reached the landing and the large stained glass window that lit the stairs, his family crest glowing in the worn dusk sunlight, and he felt an unfamiliar sense of pride. House Korthala, no longer synonymous with dark magics and corruption, it would hold a reputation for justice and altruism, and one that he intended to earn for it.
Ah, Valigar,
came the familiar voice, the ranger glancing up to see old Alargard descending the staircase above.
I was hoping I would catch you. I would give thanks for your hospitality. You are leaving. At noon tomorrow, yes, but you are always out and about. I thought to seize my chance now while I saw you. The estate has been keeping you busy. In a way, though it has been other business which occupied my time of late. Oh ho, do not speak to me of business,
the mage chuckled.
I had quite forgotten what a den of thieves the city of coin could be. Deals broken and remade in the blink of an eye, everyone fighting for that extra gold piece. But my business is over now, thank Mistra, and I can leave the trading to the merchants. So it is off to Waterdeep for me, where I can return to my studies.
Valigar nodded. It was strange seeing the man again after so long, the memories of his youth and those long-forgotten lessons, something he had believed he had put behind him. But for all his reluctance towards the end, Alargard had been a good tutor, and it was not his fault that Valigar's own path had differed from his family's expectations. He swallowed dryly.
I have plans to be out this evening, but I have a little time yet, perhaps we talk over a cup.
Alargard smiled, dark eyes sparkling.
Yes, I think I should like that very much.
They took their tea in the library, sat in the armchairs either side of windows just as they had when he had first arrived there 4 days ago. Alargard seemed to sense his reluctance to speak of their studies together, Valigar conceding to tell him, after some prompting, of his trouble with the slavers and their eventual victory.
Well, it sounds as though you have been busy,
Alargard smiled.
Your mother would be proud, she always said you were destined for great things.
Valigar said nothing, mention of the woman stirring the familiar guilt, and he turned to look out at the well-tended grounds next to them, golden in the dying light.
I heard, you know,
continued the mage quietly,
how she died. That in the end magic consumed her mind. It was a pity I learned all this after the fact, perhaps if I had been here I could have, but no.
He sighed.
It is useless to meander along such imaginings. I just wish to say I understand why you took the course you did, Valigar, and perhaps she would too.
Valigar dipped his face, the words coming slightly hoarse.
Thank you, Alargard. Yes, well, enough of this,
the mage continued briskly.
I am sure you do not wish to spend your entire evening listening to the ramblings of an old man. Go and enjoy your victory while you may.
The coronet was crowded with the usual noise and laughter. Valigar watched it with a smile, glad to see the difference from the places he had been forced to frequent most recently, half an ear on the conversation next to him as Minsk gave Hendak a blow-by-blow description of their meeting with Ahid's old gang, an account only old soldiers could truly enjoy.
Here now,
gasped a voice behind him, Valigar turning to see the once whore, Violet, setting her empty tray upon the counter, her silver tooth winking as she offered him a smile.
"'Tis a proper scrum out there tonight. 3 more ales, please, Bernard, and a flagon of small beer." "Violet, my flower,"
boomed Hendak cheerfully,
"take a cup with us while you wait. My friends were just telling me of the end of Ahid's gang." "Here now, is that so?"
the woman cried, as delighted as the old gladiator.
"It is I that should be buying you the drink then. How did you come by them? I heard they've been lying low since Ahid disappeared 2 months back." "He sought us out actually,"
offered Valigar,
"or Minsk at least, using a ceramics dealer of the promenade to lay a trap for him." "Yes,"
agreed Minsk sternly,
"Ryko and his daughter may now be at peace once more."
Violet's well-plucked eyebrows disappeared under her fringe.
"Ryko? Old Ryko S.E. near? That great fat fella?" "Yes, you know of him." "Oh, though I'm probably one of the few left who do. He used to work with the slavers over near the bridge, nigh on 20 years back now."
Valigar felt a sudden knot tighten in his stomach.
"He told us he was a contact for Ahid's gang." "Oh ho, I'd say he was a mite more than that, pet.
Violet laughed grimly.
Him and his lass were partners with Lady Nan for a spell. At one time, they were supplying half the slaves in Athkatla. A woman!
Cried Minsk.
Young Katrin.
Violet shook her head.
No, I think her name was Ethel, his wife, as he would say, though no god had blessed it. Anyways, it all went sour when Ehud came along. He could supply people faster and cheaper with that fleet of his, and Lady Nan dropped that pair straight away. He and Ehud partnered up and drove Rygo out of business. Why, I expect he's as happy to hear about the end of Ehud's gang as we.
Rygo was nodding, his daughter at his side, and watching as he cheerfully dropped the purse into the hand of the robed man before him, the grin suddenly frozen on his face as he glanced past him to the company of watchmen that were crossing the slowly emptying promenade. The robed man whipped round at his look, and Valigar felt a surge of angry regret as he recognized the tanned face of his once mentor.
"Stand where you're at by order of the watch,"
barked the tall, freckled Captain Ludan, the men behind him fanning out the surround the small stall as Valigar and Minsk stepped forward.
"So, Alargard, it seems we are to meet again before you leave." "The mage from the battle,"
accused Minsk hotly.
"Valigar, you know this man." "I thought I did, but it seems I was mistaken."
Rigo's tiny eyes were darting about them, his nervousness no longer an act as he faltered his welcome.
"Minsk and Valigar, too, we have heard what happened to Ehud's gang. We are more than grateful for your intervention."
Valigar raised a cool eyebrow.
"Indeed you should be, since it was you who first arranged it. Sending Minsk to that den was the first step in wiping out your old rivals. I know all about your past dealings, Rygo se near." "Why, yes,"
he nodded quickly.
"I freely admitted to you my past, but that does not mean I would take up the trade again." "Well, then you have nothing to worry about,"
said Ludan curtly.
"I'm sure any investigations into your recent dealings with prove the same."
At a nod from their captain, two guards stepped forward to take them, Katrin suddenly frantic.
No, it was not me. Father planned it all. I was barely a girl when all this was begun an age ago. It was him, he threatened me." "Silence, Katrin!"
roared Rygo, struggling against the guard that held him as he tried to lash out at her.
"He made me go along with it. He heard Ehud's gang and Alargard had arranged to export the slaves to Mulhorand. Father knows as much as they of the trade from his old dealings. He sold them many of the slaves himself. He approached the mage and struck the same deal for a lower cut of the coin, on the proviso that the competition was wiped out at the same time. Then he could just wait until all this fervor about the slaving had died down and start trading again. That was his plan, he told me. I never wanted any part in it."
She finally broke down, limp in the guard's grasp as she sobbed into her hand, more than one of the surrounding watchmen looking sympathetic to her plights. Valigar snorted bitterly. Men were ever fools for a crying maid. He wondered if Magistrate Ionulan would be similarly impressed.
"Take them over to the jail,"
ordered Ludan,
"and as for you—" "I have committed no crime here,"
Alargard interrupted calmly.
"No transactions have taken place."
Ludan saw things differently.
"The dealing of slaves is a crime, and your work with this pair is enough for a charge of conspiracy to the act, though perhaps a confession where others are implicated will be looked upon favorably by the magistrates."
The mage breathed a terse sigh.
"Fine, I will come. I know what you likely think of me, Valigar,"
he continued, patiently waiting for the two guards to step in and take his arms,
"but I really did wish to pay my respects to your parents."
Valigar felt the cool hatred suddenly flare.
"Speak not of them, slaver. You betrayed Ehid's gang knowing they would be out for your blood. What better a place to seek sanctuary than at the estate of the wizard murderer, Korthala? I was a fool to trust you, mage. You do not understand, Valigar,
the man pleaded, this hatred seeming to distress him more than anything so far.
I needed the coin for my studies, the things I am learning could benefit generations of mages. Back in Mulhorand, slavery is way of life, the slaves themselves are owned by the temples and treated fairly, some even able to gain their freedom. The nobles of Athkatla would have found a way to dispose of these slaves one way or another. I was acting for the good of all.
Valigar snorted.
I doubt any here would see it as such. And I suppose you'd rather see them all floating face down in the river?
Snapped Alargard.
I would rather see them freed, as would any decent man.
The mage laughed bitterly.
As ever, so quick to judge, I wonder if Ades even stood a chance. Do not bring my mother into this. Why,
Alargard roared back,
when she is the root of it all. Selfish boy! You only ever saw things your own way, you're right and you're wrong. Ades loved you, you were her only son and you destroyed her. She gave you all you could have ever wanted as a child, a stable home, a fine education, a loving family. How do you think she felt when you rejected all she was? The letters I would get from her, pages and pages on how you were, the way you had found your strength in arms rather than the magic for which her ancestors were so famed, how proud she was of you. She never scorned you for turning away from the art she so loved, but you could not afford her the same courtesy. It broke her heart when you finally left home and turned your back on her for good, and your poor father could do nothing to comfort her. No wonder she turned so wholly to her magic, she had nothing left after you went.
He threw a gnarled finger out at him, a guard leaping in to wrestle the arm behind his back, Alargard still raging.
She may have been corrupted in the end, but not because of the magic, boy, it was because of you.
And Valigar stood there dumb, as the mage was marched away. End of chapter.